Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode 33 in the Craft Fair booth review series where I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by a channel member, and I'm going to break this review down into 10 different segments. Along the way, I'll point out things that the vendor is doing well and should continue to do, and then I'll also identify some areas where there's room for improvement. During the review, keep your craft fair booth in mind so that you can apply these tips in order to take your booth to the next level. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, and so for today's booth review, we're going to be taking a look at Deidra's booth, and her business name is Artsy Craft-Dee. All right, so right off the bat, tremendous business name. Tremendous business name. I love the wordplay there. Very nice. And she makes fantasy and fairy tale art as well as crochet creations. Okay, so we're going to be looking at basically a multi-purpose booth, and then we're also going to be discussing later on how we can incorporate her boyfriend's works into the booth as well. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty interesting setup. She's based in Pennsylvania in the York area, so if you're out in that area, go ahead and try to find her at a show and support her business and all that. So one thing that we're going to take a look at with this review is, so I asked Deidra if she had any particular questions that we should kind of focus on during the review, and incorporating her boyfriend's materials is one element that we're going to look at, but she also is wondering how to get her sidewalls and her tablecloths wrinkle-free, even if she's already rolled them and ironed them. Okay, so iron them and then rolling them instead of folding them. So we'll take a look at a couple of things that she can do for that as well. But without further ado, let's take a look at the booth. And here we are. Here is the first view of the booth. We have 4 different images. Okay, so this one is kind of like a pulled back shot of the entire booth, and then we'll have a view of this left hand portion with the rack, and then we'll have a view of this center table, and then finally the right side of the booth. Okay, so we'll have up close shots of those 3 segments along with this pulled back shot. Side note, I'm pretty sick, so if my voice sounds a little bit odd in this review, that's why. So we're going to hang in there and push through this particular review, but just wanted to make a disclosure there in case if I sound really weird. But let's go ahead and dive into our first element. So it's going to be displays. Now let's go ahead and work our way from left to right so we can take a look up close. And here is the left side as promised. It's the rack for the hanging materials and good use of them. I like that you have the sidewall up on the tent so that you have a nice solid backdrop for everything that's hanging here, okay? And then the nice thing about all the items, just about all the items that are hanging here, is that they have a dark border. All right, so the picture frames pretty much all have a dark border. There's one, lighter brown one or two here. This right here is the only item that doesn't really have a dark border, so it doesn't show quite as well as the others. We can zoom in a little bit further, and you can see that it just doesn't have kind of like that same defined space for itself, so out of all of them, this is the one that perhaps doesn't show as good, but I don't think that's a tremendous loss considering, 95% of everything else that's on this rack looks great, okay? But just something to kind of consider as you, frame your materials, and just kind of keep this in the back of your mind how it's going to look up against whatever it's being displayed upon. So making good choices, just kind of continue on that path and you'll be all right. So yeah, everything that's being displayed on this rack looks great. There's good clarity. There's proper spacing, right? So that's another thing that we look at with displays is everything kind of crammed in, and does it have its own defined area where you can look at it and digest it and just absorb the artwork in a good manner. So I'd say that you're doing a really nice job with that as well. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the center table. So that is this angle right here, and kind of in contrast with what we just looked at, I would say your spacing here is a little bit subpar, okay? So there is a little bit of cramming going on, and throughout the review, I'm going to point out a couple of different sections during the review where I think you should consider going with a double booth. And throughout 33 episodes of booth reviews, I don't know if I've ever really recommended, kind of made a hard recommendation for a vendor to strongly consider going with a double booth. But I think in this case, as we talk about a couple of different things, it's going to come up, okay? But in this particular case, I'm going to point out a few different things here as to why. So first of all, your art prints. Okay, the art prints, you have a lot of nice designs. You can see that there's some nice vivid colors and there's different sizes. Okay, so that's kind of nice. So you give people the option to get, a small, medium, or large print. But the designs themselves are very, very hidden. There's only just a sliver of the design actually showing on each level. Okay, so you're not really giving your own artwork the justified space that it deserves. You know what I mean? You've put a lot of time and effort into creating these, but they're not being shown off in a way that, like I said, is justified to the effort that you put in. So this is one area where I feel like it does require expansion, but there's really no room to do it. So this is kind of like exhibit A in the evidence bag. But like I said, as we go along, I'll kind of just point out a few different things to keep in mind for possible booth expansion. But otherwise, let's take a look at some other displays on this table. So here on the left side, we have the rotating taller display. I think it's serving a great purpose. The cards, they look great inside of there. And also, I like the placement of it on the table. I like that this is on an end and the fact that it's basically the tallest thing on this particular table. Whenever you have something that's taller than other objects or displays on the table, it's always a good idea to put that on an end and create a little bit of like a canyon effect, I call it, where you have your high parts on the edges and then you start to work downwards as you approach the middle. So over here is your lowest point, and we'll talk about this later in the verticality segment, but as I said, I do like the placement of this particular display and its functionality. Now down here, you have some other art prints, and I would assume that these are the large size because here you have small, medium, and large on the sign. And on the rack, we see this smaller size, which, maybe that's like 4x6 or 5x7, or maybe these are the 5x7s and these are 4x6. Either way, these appear to be the small and medium, and then down here I think is where you have the large. All right, so that is all of that section right there. Not too big of an issue to have these on the table since you already have the similar, the matching designs up on the rack. It's just a matter of we have to figure out how to show at least one version of all of these designs pretty clearly. Okay, so that is going to be the goal moving forward with this particular set of items, is you have to figure out how to get every design to show pretty clearly. Essentially what you have done over here, okay? All right, and then as we work towards the right side of the table here, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in because this is where we start to get really tight and kind of cramped at the booth. So we need a little bit of clarity, so we're going to zoom in here. And all right, on this first level, you have stickers and nice divided segments. I really like this. And I don't know what kind of tray this is, but this was a really, really good use of dividers, okay, to clearly define separate areas so that each of these designs can show off very well. So we kind of talked about this over on the rack on the left side of the booth by having, nice, clearly defined areas where there's a little bit of separation and you can digest it well. So great job here. I also like the fact that, you've gone with 2 levels, so you get a little bit of verticality there. You're also saving on space as opposed to just, having one and then it's like, oh, now I got to put the other one on its side, side by side. You're saving some space by going upwards, okay? So that's also a good decision there. On top of it, you have the coloring book, okay? So it's on a little stand and very minimal. Also, the fact that you chose black with kind of like a black cloth on the riser that it's on Very nice choice, very subtle, and it's keeping the focus on the item. So great job with that. I think the issue basically lies in how this is very tight up against your art prints, and then now it's very, very tight up against your smaller crocheted items to the right. Okay, so basically it's just a spacing issue. I think if there was more spacing in between these segments, maybe something like 4 to 6 inches. So say about the size of 1 to 2 of these segments on each side. Okay, so you kind of want that space about here, and then you like to have that space about here. Now, again, this is where we're starting to touch on, is the 10 by 10 too limited for you? Okay, so that's something that you're going to have to consider. On the right side, we have the crocheted segment, and these are smaller items, okay, and they're displayed in a couple of different ways. One is kind of like a throw together type of situation where, you know, they're all bundled in there and you can just kind of sort through them and check out ones that you like. And then you also have a little bit of a structured display above it. So I like the combination of this. It's kind of nice to be able to see them outwards from a little bit of a distance as a shopper. So like as you're approaching the booth, you can, you know, kind of see them as you're walking up. And then because there's so many different designs, it's good to just have them kind of contained in the general vicinity so that people can look through them. Okay, so to have a section, you know, say for example, if you were like with a vertical rack or a vertical display like this, to do that with this many designs, that would require a lot of space on your table. So for smaller items, especially for relatively inexpensive items, I think it's more than okay to have kind of like this bucket or, you know, tote or basket type of setup where they're all kind of collected in one area and there's something above it to draw the people in. Okay, now we're going to move on to the right side of the booth, and kind of a lot going on over here. Okay, so we'll break it down and we'll go from left to right. Okay, so on the far left side over here, let's zoom in a little bit. And you can see this spinning display with the pegboards. Nice height. I think it's a nice height for having something on the edge of the table. So like meaning on the shopper's side. It's not super, super tall where, again, if you have something behind it, it's not going to be a blocking issue. Okay, so I like it. It's a good little spinning display and it's serving a purpose well. Okay, so these are for magnets and you have a little sign that says individually priced on top of it. So I'd assume that this spins around and, you know, shoppers can check that out. So very nicely done over there. Now down here, you have sort of like a picture frame that's facing outwards. And I like the positioning of this particular display. You have it kind of diagonally pointing out. You can see it's not really facing straight out this way and it's not facing straight down this way. It's kind of like diagonal out. And that's nice because it can attract potentially shoppers from multiple angles. Okay, so not just one direction. So that's good to see. I always like to see that on the corner. If there's like some sort of corner that's sticking out in a booth, it's always good to see some sort of a display set at a diagonal angle. So very good there. Over here, once we start to work our way deeper into this table, we have a couple of interesting stands. I like the way that these look. They're serving these particular items very well. Okay, so sometimes when you get large items like this, especially at a booth where you have a lot of smaller items, it can be really tricky to figure out how to display an item of a large size without it making it feel like really out of place or just completely removed from the vibe of the booth that's already established. Okay, so very nicely done with these 3 items right here. And these items are the most premier, like high-end items at the booth. So where you have them positioned, I think is very nice. They're obviously a focal point at the booth. Definitely is an eye catcher to pull people in, because crochet work, a lot of people, you see crochet work that is maybe the size of like a baseball, maybe the size of, maybe like a football. These are, I mean, seriously, borderline like beach ball size. These are really large items, okay? So a lot of effort went into these, and I think you did a really nice job of showcasing these outwards to draw people into the booth. Okay, now in the back over here, this is a little bit trickier to see because there's kind of a lot going on as you look at this. You can kind of see like the rack behind it. You see a lot of signage in the area, but you have a big glass jar with a bunch of plastic bags, and above it, it says recycle. So that's kind of cool. A lot of states are adopting a more conscious effort to, be careful with plastics and reuse them. If you're going to use them, at least get a lot of uses out of them if you can. But this is a nice touch, and it's something that I don't think I've seen in the booth review series at all, in 33 episodes. So again, some states are more like conscious of this than others, but it's nice to see, it's nice to see that effort put in there. But the placement of it is something that I might kind of call to question though, because it's an extremely prominent placing of this. Okay. So it's like, ooh, do I want to dedicate, that kind of real estate for this? And don't get me wrong, great cause. And, I like the thought in it, but is that space the right choice? And again, this is another thing I'm circling back to with the thought of possibly expanding the booth to like a 20 by 10 instead of a 10 by 10. Things like this, you won't have to kind of stack up on above such valuable items and such great items at your booth, So it's like just one of those things to add to the list to think about when it comes to, possibly expanding, because it's a great idea. I love it, but that's, big focal point of the booth. All right, now let's wrap up displays with this final area right here. So you have a riser, okay, that is setting up this sign right here. No problems with that. That's cool, because especially since it's providing space for your gumball machine. All right, so great use there to, again, go vertical so that you are able to put this much material out at your 10 by 10 booth. And then finally over here, we have sort of like a black TV tray with a black cloth over it, and then a wooden crate that is supporting a couple signs, both on top of it and in front of it. Okay, so great job there. No issues with any of this. And again, smart to go with the stacked setup to get the most bang for your buck, basically, with the space that you have. So with that being said, on displays, I know that I kind of ran really long on this first segment, but there was a lot to go through, okay? So I hope that there was some good things to think about in that particular segment. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to pricing. So we'll stay on this right side for now and just zoom in a little bit and see what we've got going on for pricing. So let's start with these big premier items right here, okay? So you got the tags on them, $250. $300, $180. Some people might say, wow, that's a lot for a craft fair. I strongly recommend that you try not to think that way, okay? Because you just don't know who's walking through a craft fair. You don't know what people's budgets are. And Deidra has made a very conscious effort at this booth to have a really wide range of prices. Okay, we're going to see items that are literally as low as $2. Okay, so the fact that we have that kind of a wide price range, I recommend it. That's kind of what I prefer to see. And again, you just don't know what people's budgets are, so cover all of them. Okay, give yourself the best shot to just generate sales. All right, and yes, dedicating real estate to items that are priced very, very small, sometimes it can feel counterproductive. Like, oh my gosh, I'm giving up a lot of my space at the booth for items that are, $2, $3, $4, $5. How much am I going to have to sell to, even make my booth feedback and make this event profitable? Well, that's why you want to have a wide range of prices, because when people start to mix in those 10, 20, 50, maybe even higher dollar purchases, that is where you start taking big chunks out of that profitability goal, or whatever goal you've set for sales or whatever. So that's why you always want to have a nice wide range of prices. And that is what we're going to see at this booth. So the price tags themselves, they look great. You've got the name of the item, and then you've got the price is very clear. The price tag is right next to the item itself. Okay, so that's wonderful to see. All very good right here. Now let's cover this sign really quick. Even though we have signage marketing kind of coming up, we'll get this sign now because technically it is a pricing sign. So it says $2 per token. What will you win? The prizes range from $2 to $20. Everyone wins something. And then of course there's a color chart, okay, for the different color gumballs. So really cool element of the booth. I like this a lot. I've had a lot of vendors actually ask about this. Like, what are some fun things that I can do at my booth to not only attract people, but make it like an experience that people can remember? Like, I went to a lot of booths today and I saw a lot of cool stuff, but what was that one vendor that had that gumball machine? Like, yeah, that was really cool, So like it sometimes it's just things like that where it's that extra element that you can add in that shoppers will remember you by. And that's important, especially for getting those repeat customers that come on back. So I like this sign. I like that it's paired up with the gumball machine. If anything, I would make this, if possible, I don't know if it's possible, to lower this riser a little bit so that the sign is like directly above the gumball machine. I think most people can take a look at it and be like, oh, okay, that goes with that. But just to bring them a little bit closer together, I think would be nice. And we're going to talk about verticality later on, but you're going to start to need to cut out a little bit more space for you to be visible as the vendor. Okay, so this is one way that you can do it. So again, I'm going to touch on that later, but keep this in mind as something that we talked about for cutting out a little bit of verticality space for yourself. I'm having trouble enunciating my words well. I just greatly apologize for the way I sound in this review. But okay, so let's continue on with the pricing. We're going to work our way to this center table here and zoom in a little bit. And we're going to have a lot of different pricing signs. All right, so on this right side here, you can see the magnets and this rotating display. It says individually priced. Okay, so those are taken care of by that sign. Then you have this sign that says Adopt a Crochet Cutie, $9 each or 2 for $15. So that covers everything here, including what's down in the basket. All right. And then over here, it says coloring books, includes pencil set, $10 each. So very nice. I like the addition of the includes pencil set because first of all, it's showing greater value. Right? So greater value for the buyer, like, oh, that's, something I don't have to worry about, or I don't have to wear down the pencils that I have. Cool. And it also just provides, a little bit of clarity. So the $10 each, that's nice. That's covering that. And, they're side by side. So very easy to understand. Down here, stickers, $2 each or 6 for 10. Okay, so you've got a little bundle pricing going on mixed in throughout the booth at a few different locations now. That's great. That's great to see. So giving people some options and hopefully encourage those multi-item transactions. Very nice here. And then we're going to circle back to the art prints that we touched on earlier. You've got the small, medium, and large, $10, $15, and $20 respectively. And then you also have another bundle option here where instead of doing a certain dollar discount, you have a multi-item discount. Okay, so if you buy 2, you get a third free. All right, so there's a couple of different ways to do bundle pricing, and they're both showcased here. So that's excellent, and it's giving people a lot of purchasing variety. So again, not only do we have a lot of variety when it comes to just the prices themselves, right? We saw the expensive crochet items over here for the items that are very large. I can't even imagine how many dozens and dozens of hours to create those. Let me know in the comments, Deidra, how many hours it took to create these 3 items. I would love to know how much effort was put into those because, again, that's something where people see a sticker price and they're like, oh, this is a craft fair. But it's like, okay, you don't even, if you say that, you automatically know that the person has no idea how much effort it took to craft something, you know? So go ahead and drop the time that you worked on those into the comments and let people know how long you worked on those. So again, circling back to the pricing, we have multiple different bundle pricing options. So that's great to see. And then over here, we can't quite make this one out in this angle. Let me see if I can catch it in a different view because I want to see what those are. Okay, here we go. We can see the greeting cards. Hand-painted greeting cards, 5 each or 3 for $12. Okay, so good value. Again, you're basically getting $1 off if you get 3 of them. You're getting $1 off of each one. So very nice to provide those options. Greeting cards especially. So vendors, those of you that make greeting cards, definitely encourage you to offer some kind of bundle pricing option, because generally if you're shopping for a greeting card, you know, yes, you might be thinking of like one specific holiday or birthday or anniversary or some kind of occasion that's specific for one person. But if you start to offer bundle pricing, maybe people are like, oh, well, you know, their birthday it's coming up. It's, you know, that's maybe like a month away. I can just go ahead and get a card for them too. Or so greeting cards especially are a great item to encourage multiple item transactions on. So definitely have that at your booth as an option. And this is one of those examples too, where as a vendor, I think it's definitely okay to kind of give the shopper a little nudge, you know, nothing super pressure packed or anything like that. But if they hand you one greeting card to say, you know, hey, I've got this bundle deal, anybody else's birthday or anything coming up, just, you know, throw that out there, you know, just toss that out there, and you never know, you know, so that might help to, again, push you towards your sales goal for the day. All right. And then when we get to the left side of the booth right here, let's go ahead and zoom in. We've got quite a bit of signage, mostly individually marked from what I can tell. Okay, so these items, they are varied greatly, not only in the mediums of art that they are, but the size, the shape, all that. So we see individual items over here, and that's great. I think that's good to see, providing some pretty good clarity. The only thing I would say possibly is when you have situations like this where, you know, you've got the price tag sort of hanging from this particular wire on the rack and they're both level, maybe I would put like an arrow pointing up or an arrow pointing down just to help signify, okay, you know, the one on top is 55 and the one below is 40. Just something super simple to help provide that clarity, I guess. So besides that, that's really all that I can suggest as far as help on the pricing. So one thing I want to mention though, on this angle, when we go over here to the center table and we start to see all these different colors, what I would recommend is that you unify these signs in some way. Now, I do see that you're using your branded font, which is great. That's something that all vendors should be doing. If you have a font that's pretty much established with your branding and your logo, roll that into your signage, you know, carry that through into your signage and help to basically establish the vibe throughout the entire booth. All right. But all these signs are different colors, and some of the colors aren't even represented in your logo. Okay, so we kind of see like this orange color. It's not quite the yellow that's in your logo. The blue is, I would say the blue is probably the closest, you know, to this blue, but it's still not quite there. And then this purple, you know, indigo, whatever it might be, is definitely off from what I would basically call like a purple pink blend that we see over here. Okay, so that is something I think that you should try to address at the booth, because as you incorporate more and more material into your booth, you want people to find things as easily as possible. And this area of the booth already is pretty tight. It's pretty packed in, okay? So make it easy on people. Make your signage uniform. And if you can, you know, incorporate the exact colors into each sign. So for example, maybe you go with, yellow background. Okay, so yellow printing or background, and then you use the blue and the purple fonts. So maybe the title of the item, say, stickers or coloring books, maybe that part is the blue, and then all the other font is purple. Something like that. Just a way that you can keep all of the signs uniform, but then also accurately representing the fantastic branding that you have. That's something that we're going to talk about now as we roll into marketing. So let's go ahead and begin the marketing segment. The branding is so on point. So on point. It is a fantastic logo, a fantastic business name, and the color is really wonderful as well. So you basically have 5 branding colors, okay, because you do utilize the black in not only the background banner, but the tablecloth. You have these little notches, these little weights kind of sprinkled throughout the booth. A lot of your displays are black, and then you have white as well. So you have the white in the business name, and there's also the canopy itself. Okay, so that's something that stands out is those sidewalls. Okay, so black, white, and then you have your 3 alternate colors. You've got the yellow, the blue, and the purple. Really, really wonderful. It's good to have that many color options. Sometimes, I mean, I'm kind of guilty of it myself, pretty much with, how-to craft fairs. I basically just have white, black, and the green, kind of like the minty olive green shade. So being able to lean on this many different colors is nice. The banner itself, very well done. The logo is a nice size and it paints a picture. Okay. So you see the paintbrush, the crochet hook, all that, the pencil, it's already starting to provide an idea of, okay, like what's gonna be featured at this booth. You could literally block out everything that's happening at the booth. Say if you had like an imaginary line down here and everything was covered and you just looked at this logo right here. Just by looking at these 3 things, you're already getting an idea of what's being sold at this booth. Okay, so that's really smart to incorporate that into your actual logo. So it has your business name and it says Creative Studio. Okay, underneath fantasy and fairy tale art, and also crochet creations. And then under that, you go into even further detail and provide additional context. Okay, so really by looking at the banner, people know for sure everything that's happening at this booth and what's being presented. So great job with that. Absolutely wonderful banner. Now located on various parts of the booth, you have business cards. Okay, so there's 2 on this table alone. I believe on the other table, there's at least 1 other. And check out the stands, right? They're like little easels, super cute, right? And of course, it reinforces what's happening at the booth and the kind of artwork that you create. So very, very cool. This is the 2nd booth review in a row where we've seen really interesting setups for the business cards. So love to see that. Very nice. Okay, now let's check out the right side of the booth over here. So on all of these signs, we see your business logo featured at the bottom. Another thing that is great to see at the booth. Okay, so whenever you have signage, go ahead and throw that on there. Just remind people the name of the business of the booth that they're standing at. It does not hurt to reinforce that. So great to see that on the signage. And as we discussed earlier, we see the business cards here and here. So you've got 4 locations with your business cards. Fantastic. On this side, you have essentially an entire marketing table. And this is great. You've got the QR code and it links up to Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, right? So you got them all covered. And then you also reinforce it with just the handle itself. You've got a checkout sign over here for your accepted payment methods. All wonderful to see. Also, the fact that you've got this listed on your accepted payment method sign is wonderful. It says all sales are final. Okay, don't be afraid to put that out there, you guys, to let people know that, hey, this is my refund return policy. If all sales are final, cool, that's it. At least you're letting people know this is what the deal is. All right. So that is going to help you to eliminate any kind of possible headaches that might occur with somebody being like, I took it home and I changed my mind. Meh, those type of people, like, just it's better to avoid them by putting this out. Okay. So great job having that on your signage. Down below, you've got an email list signed. So that is fantastic. So important to build up those email contacts, you guys, especially if you want to start accruing a bit of a following as you go from show to show. This is one of the things that can keep you busy and keep you rolling in the off season. So as you start to build up your email contact list throughout the year, throughout the craft season, compile all that, keep that organized from the very get-go. I'm going to include a little link up here at the top of a video that is fantastic for this. This is a video that's geared towards organizers, but vendors, trust me, you can get good value out of this video because I can show you exactly how to set up your email contacts so that you can really, really keep things organized. Okay, so be sure to check that out. But to see this sheet, wonderful. Also has the QR code on it. Possibly that goes to some sort of like, email registration form. I know that you have a .com website. So some people have like a page on their .com website where it's like a newsletter sign up or some area of this website where people can just submit their email address. So that might be where that goes. So good job having both options. People can either write it down or take the QR code and keep things a little bit more privately if they don't want to put it on the sheet in front of everyone. And then down here, we're going to zoom in a little bit. I did not take a look at these three ahead of time, so we're going to kind of find out together. Come see me at these local events. Fantastic. Always good to see this. Keep your event calendars up to date and be sure to print out these kind of sheets because, again, as I just said, if you want to start to build up a following from event to event, this is a great way to do it, okay? So always excellent to see something like this out at the booth. This is something that you should kind of maintain and update throughout the year. Doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Go into Canva, make yourself a template, okay? And as the dates come and go, just keep shifting this forward and keep this up to date with, all your upcoming events. Because if somebody comes to this booth and they really like it and they're like, dang, I wish my friend knew about this or wish my, family member could check this out. Great. Then you've got something for them to take home with them or, even take like a picture of and send to their friend. And that can possibly get you that combined traffic that adds up from show to show. So these are the little touches in the marketing segment that I like to see. That's definitely a vendor thinking ahead and trying to help their cause, not just today, but in the future. But yeah, as far as your signage and as far as your marketing goes, I think you're doing a really good job. There's a couple other things that I can touch on with the marketing. I guess this could be saved for the color contrast and texture portion of the review, but I'll hit it now because these little table accent runners are essentially a marketing element, okay? Because these colors are matched really well to the colors in your logo, okay? So this is pretty darn close. I mean, the yellow, the blue, and the purple are very, very close matches, okay? So it's pretty amazing that you were able to get fabric like that freaking close. But good job with that. I think it's a really nice touch. Okay, so some vendors, they don't want just the black tablecloths. They want a little something. And this is like a really, really smart way to do this. Okay, so really nice element. I would roll this into marketing because it goes along with your branding just perfectly. On this side, you have two green ones. Now this, I would change. Okay, so if we look at this view, it's going to give us a really nice angle of all of them together. Okay, so you have yellow, blue, purple, and then what I would do is get another blue and then another yellow and substitute those. So blue here, yellow here. So it's basically like symmetrical in a way. And I think that would provide also some additional balance and tie-in where this table, it has, the similar items, but the green doesn't really hit home with the marketing in any way. So that's what I would do. If you could go ahead and get a hold of a blue one and a yellow one, I would go ahead and swap here and here. All right, so now let's talk about vertical space. Since I basically just combined the signage and marketing elements and didn't even realize it. So let's just go ahead and move on to vertical space. So this is something I wanted to circle back to at a later point in the review, and now we can talk about it. So at some point, at some area at the booth, you as the vendor have to be very visible to the shoppers. And your vertical space it's almost all the same level. Okay, so we can kind of draw like a line sort of in this region right here. And you see a lot of items kind of topping out at about this level. Okay, so the cards kind of top out around here. The art prints top out here. You've got, looks like a bag, all right, a crocheted bag of bags, which is pretty cool in itself, right? So you've got that topping out, then you have this here, and then also the turtle or tortoise or sea turtle, right? So that's all pretty uniform. You want to ideally kind of break it up a little bit. And we did mention a slight area that's open here, but it's not big, okay? And then when we go to the right side of the booth, you kind of have like a little cutout over here, but again, it's, kind of slim. So this, again, is just one of those reasons to consider, possibly going to a 10 by 20 booth because of the fact that you're very, very vertical at almost the entire booth, okay? And there's not much room for you, the vendor, to be visible to the shoppers, which is definitely important to the shoppers. Be sure that you've carved out enough space for you to be visible. So it looks like from here, you'd be pretty visible from this angle of the booth. But if you were approaching from this side, that's a lot of obstruction. And then especially from this angle too. Unless you're like 7'3", but you know what I'm saying? So this is another reason to kind of consider that extra space, having a bigger booth, because you'll be able to spread things out a little bit more. You won't have to go so vertical in like all places, and you'll be able to kind of have like those peaks and valleys that represent more of like a healthy vertical reach at the booth. So yeah, just one thing I wanted to kind of talk about with verticality at the booth. Otherwise, how you're doing it, I think, is smart. We touched on a lot of different ways where you're stacking very well. So that's all good. I think it's just a matter of kind of carving out some peaks and valleys for yourself. Okay, now let's talk about colors, contrast, and texture. And yes, we have talked about quite a bit of this already. So we did talk about the colors, very strong, nice incorporation throughout the booth. Even in the back of the clipboard here, the purple matches very well. Okay, so these little elements that are mixed in, very nice. Okay, now one question that Deidra had that I want to circle back to now is she asked how to get her canopy sidewalls and her tablecloths wrinkle-free, even if she's already ironed them and rolled the materials instead of folding them. Okay, so I think the solution here is going to come down to stretching. When you've got wrinkles that just won't get the hell out of the material, basically try to get them pulled tight, okay? Because that's naturally going to pull a lot of the wrinkles out when the fabric is just pulled tighter. And I think we kind of see that in this general vicinity where the fabric, I think, is pulled a little tighter over here, and we're not really seeing as much wrinkle as, say, over here where there's some slack and, the wrinkles basically have a chance to be more defined when there's more slack. Okay, so that I would definitely extend down to the tablecloths. With black tablecloths, I would consider getting the stretch ones. Now, I know that's a little bit more tricky when you have odd sized tables. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what size of table this is. If I had to guess, I would say 4 feet for this particular one. And then for this particular table, I think this is a 6-footer. So I think you have a 4-footer and a 6-footer. Try to see if you can get stretch tablecloths. They're not super expensive, really not expensive at all. I think they're like, generally $15 to $20 or so. But that is going to basically completely eliminate the situation of wrinkles showing up in the tablecloths. Now, if you want to stick with the more traditional tablecloths that hang down, that's going to be a little bit trickier to get those wrinkles out, okay? Because if you iron them and if you roll them, that is kind of like the two biggest ways that you can alleviate the issue of wrinkles. And if you can't stretch them, then your options are getting really limited, so just keep doing what you're doing. I don't think by any means they look terrible, by the way. So I know that, you're trying to, the booth reviews, anybody that's getting a booth review done is really trying to dig and go above and beyond and looking for any kind of things that they can improve at their booth. I get that 100%. But with the particular issue of, wrinkles in your items, I don't think anything's like super egregious or standing out in a way that's unappealing. I think, what I see is pretty normal, pretty standard stuff. So don't worry about it too much, but again, just consider the tension factor for getting those last few wrinkles out. Otherwise, colors, contrast, and texture, good at the booth. Over here, we do see the grid pattern showing through on the rack. But again, because of the fact that you have the defined frames that are kind of just cutting out the grid from around the artwork itself, I think it's very, very easy to focus on your artwork, even with this repeating grid behind it. Okay, so no issues with that. Even if it's a black against a white, I don't really have an issue with that at all, just because of how well the frames are framing your art. All right, so now let's talk about strength of theme. So strength of theme, I think, is going to improve when your signage gets more uniform, okay? So your signage over here, like your marketing signage on the right side, is nice because it has your logo stamped on each one on the bottom. That's great to see. The fact that you've carried your fonts all the way through, that part is great. But the multicolored signage over here, I think you've got enough of that reinforced with, the tablecloth colors, like those accent colors, and with your banner itself. I think that's kind of enough to support it. And plus you have, again, those business cards sprinkled throughout 4 sections of the booth. So all that is fantastic to help unify that strength of theme. But the signage over here, all the multicolored stuff, I think that could definitely improve, so would like to see it a little bit more uniform, like what you've got going on with your banner, and then just change what's literally written on them. Okay, so that'll help a lot. So your strength of theme is very, very good for its colors. Okay, so I like that. These little decorations, like the, hanging, they kind of look like, graduation tassels or whatever, but these little hanging materials, very nice. Also supporting those colors very accurately. Okay, so the yellow looks on point, the blue looks on point, and of course the black can't be screwed up, so that's great. And that looks really good. So that's just a little element of the booth that sprinkles in that theme. So very nice. Now, when it comes to the top of your tent canopy, now this particular blue, I don't know about. I don't know if I dig the blue top on the tent canopy. I think you might be better off just going with the white. The blue, it feels a little bit, if you look at the booth from this angle, if you're kind of standing back, right? And you've got an overall look of the booth. Let's pan all the way back. Okay, so here we go. The blue is kind of robbing some of the attention, I think. I think the eyes kind of wander up here. It's just natural because it's a very, very bright color that is different from most canopies, okay? So sometimes the canopy top going with an alternate color can be, I don't want to say a detriment, I don't want to say something like that strong, but I think it can do a little bit more harm than good, okay? So consider the white on top. Also, the nice thing with the white is that it's going to provide you with the best light underneath. So inside your tent, particularly when you have your sidewalls up, the white top is going to help provide a little bit more light, and it's going to distribute it in a really nice manner too. You get kind of like a nice glow underneath a white canopy. So just something to think about there with strength of theme. Now, another question that Deidra had was the possibility of incorporating her boyfriend's work. Her boyfriend has work that isn't quite like anything that's here. Okay, so Deidra has crocheted materials, she has stickers, art prints, actual, paintings. So he has sculptures that are crafted from polymer clay and found materials. Okay, so that's pretty different from what we've got going on at the booth already. So again, this is just yet another reason that I'm saying, consider a larger booth, because first of all, adding more to your existing setup is going to be really tricky. I mean, as is, you're definitely on or even past the boundary of kind of overcrowding the booth, okay? At least with the configuration that you've got going on. But with all the items that you have in there, I kind of looked at this and I can't really think of a configuration that's better. I think the configuration is good. I think it's just you've really kind of maximized and gone over, the amount of space that you've got to work with. Sometimes you just kind of run out of space, even if you have a good layout, which I think is the case here. Okay, so don't question the layout. I think the layout is nice. And viewers who are watching this booth review, let me know in the comments how you feel about this layout. If you were a visitor walking into the booth, let me know and drop a comment. Don't just post it in the live chat. Drop a comment so that Deidra can come back and see this and get some feedback, because, feedback is the only way that we can improve sometimes. Sometimes we just get stuck and, we need a second set of eyes on what we're doing. Okay. So drop a comment, and, let everybody know how you feel if you were entering this booth. But now circling back to the additional items from her boyfriend, she did mention that she doesn't think that he would have more than 2 or 3 to show at a time. However, I looked at a picture of one of them, and it was probably about the size of her largest crocheted item. Okay, so I would probably guess that it was about the size of like the sea turtle or the octopus. Okay, so that's a pretty big chunk of real estate again. And if it's 2 or 3, well then geez, now it's kind of like this whole area possibly, so that's where I think you guys are definitely going to be best served by expanding. Okay, so you're going to be able to have just more dedicated spaces, more breathability, and you'll be able to kind of just frame your zones a little bit better. You won't have to stack verticality as high and all that. So it's just going to alleviate a lot of pressure at the booth. And the nice thing too is that it can possibly bring in more shoppers at your booth at one time. Okay. Because if you get like 5 to 6 people at your booth as it is in a 10 by 10, that's probably pushing it. 5 to 6 is probably, max capacity for people to realistically and comfortably be checking things out at the booth. Okay. But if you go to a 20 by 10, I mean, you can pretty much double that. Now you're talking, 10 to 12 people for sure inside of the booth. No problem. So all that should be considered and weighed into the possible decision. Now, when it comes to your strength of theme, keep your signage consistent, and even your small pricing signage. Perhaps if your booth grows, you can make these pricing cards slightly bigger. I mean, slightly, because right now they're probably the size of a business card. Maybe it looks the size of a business card, whereas maybe you can go to like the size of an index card, like maybe like 3 by 5, and go ahead and incorporate like the color, so if you decide to make these signs, the yellow, blue, purple, or whatever, roll that into all of your signs. Okay. Every single sign at your booth should pretty much have the same theme. And by bringing your boyfriend's materials into the booth and kind of having that other item that isn't necessarily within your realm of crafts that you're already presenting, the signage is going to help to make the theme feel uniform no matter what's being displayed at the booth. Okay, so that's really important, you guys. The more that you start to branch out at your booth, the more that you're supporting roll items are going to have to be uniform, because that's going to be what feels consistent at the booth. So while the items might have a wide variety, I mean, because let's face it, you already do have quite a bit of variety at the booth. You have the crocheted items, you have buttons, magnets, stickers, art prints, you got greeting cards, and then you have the big prints. Okay, so you already have a lot going on. So even without your boyfriend's materials coming in, you already basically have to do all that you possibly can to make the booth as uniform as possible. That is another reason why I'm kind of recommending the white top instead of the blue top, because the blue doesn't quite match the shade of the blue of the branding. I mean, I guess it does, but I think just white would provide more consistency. You just kind of need that consistency with those supporting row elements. And that's what I would recommend with all of your pricing signs and your marketing signs over here. The more that you can tie all that in, the better. All right, so now let's talk about accessibility. And when I mention accessibility, I'm kind of referring to a couple different things. One, how safely are shoppers inside of your booth? Are there any kind of tripping hazards? Are there things that people can bump their heads on? All this kind of stuff. And then also accessibility from the point of view of how close do people have to be to your booth to understand what's going on before they get it. Okay, so let's touch on that element first. I think the visibility portion of accessibility overall is solid. Okay, so there's some things, especially in this center section right here, where it does get a little bit buried. The prints, you really cannot see the prints unless you are the person standing immediately in front of the prints, and you're kind of like lifting each one up and looking at each one designed by lifting it up. Okay, so that I would say is definitely a focal point that you have to work on for accessibility. And we already kind of talked about a couple different ways that you can do that. Perhaps you just display the small ones, and then that way the small ones can be shown, and you can frankly just kind of pack more in there. And maybe you have a sign that says ask for larger sizes, or maybe you have something back here that has kind of like a blank example of the three sizes. Okay, so maybe you have just like the frame, and then inside of the frame you write out something or you type out something that has the three sizes. So you say like small 5x7, medium 8x10, large 16 by 12 or something like that. Okay. That way people would get a visual of, oh, okay, like that's how big that would be, but yet they can see all the sizes. So that's one way that you can do it. Another way is by expanding the booth and going with a 10 by 20, you can maybe consider purchasing a second one of these racks and then just spreading them out. So either spreading them out more side to side, or you can essentially skip a tier and only put your artwork on every other tier. And then that way there's more of a gap and you're able to see each design better. So you got a couple of different options to work with there, and it's going to be up to you to play around with it and see which one you like better. All right, so now that we talked about some of the spacing and some of the visibility from a distance, let's go ahead and talk about the safety aspect of accessibility. Overall, I would say very good. You're using the proper tent weights. Okay, so the proper tent weights, you guys, they're nice because they are tall and they're not a cinder block or sandbags just sitting on their side that eat up a lot of the floor space and can create a tripping hazard. Okay, so using the proper tent weights are great because not only does it look better, but they are functional. Okay, so that's good to see. Otherwise, over here, just a little bit of minor rolling of the tablecloths. Over here, we can see it a little bit worse. And again, this is an area too where people have to stand very close. So this I would really watch out for. Okay, this is potentially a tripping hazard right here. So this, again, if you get those stretched tablecloths, boom, that's something you literally don't have to worry about at all. Okay, so that's another reason to get the stretched tablecloths is there's going to be no rolling and there's going to be no wrinkles. So that's kind of, getting two birds with one stone there. And then over here, we see the legs of the rack. Now, I do want to point out the fact that you have the rack pushed all the way up against the canopy wall. The reason why this is nice is because if you didn't do that, these feet of the rack would just be sticking out even further into the space. Okay, so I like the fact that the stand is about, it's pushed back so that half the stand is hidden, okay, behind that canopy wall. So you're doing the best you can. And these wire racks, unless you can set it up so that they're literally just hanging from the top and they don't have a bottom, which I really wouldn't recommend. I don't think the payoff there is good enough, because what if there's wind, right? Sometimes it can get super, super windy. And in this case, yeah, you have a building behind you, so that's not going to be an issue. So, technically if you wanted to, I guess you could like zip tie these to the top and they could just hang and you wouldn't have to worry about that. But sometimes these racks come with the feet already attached. There's a lot of things to consider here, okay? But I guess what this is boiling down to is that this is not that big of a deal. And I think people are hopefully smart enough to look down and notice that there's little stands there so that they don't trip on them. Okay. So overall accessibility at the booth, pretty strong. I think you're making a lot of good decisions. Just a couple little things to, tidy up and improve upon. And I think that's going to take it really to the next level, to where it's elite and an elite category of the booth. One last thing with accessibility I like to talk about is the general tidiness of the booth as well. So, things laying around like wrappers or your totes or fast food cups or all that stuff, we don't really see any of that at the booth. Okay. When we start to look at a couple of different angles, we don't really see any of that type of stuff laying around. So even when we kind of look in here and we're trying to see through and stuff like that, you really don't see any of that. So that's also a good sign at the booth. All right, now let's talk about general use of space. So this is where I think there's going to be a big possibility to improve at the booth. General use of space is, like I said, it's walking that line between crammed and going over that line. Okay. And it's not really the layout that's the issue. It's just the fact that, you've got a lot of artwork and it's all great. It all looks good, but you've run out of space, and that's okay, but it comes down to either, okay, now do I remove something from the booth and possibly miss out on sales I could have had? Or do I pay a bit of a higher booth fee and expand the booth out, which it makes it a little bit more of a challenge to make more profits, at least in the beginning on paper. Okay. Because yes, you are paying some sort of a doubled booth fee. Sometimes you get a break from organizers. If you get more than one booth, they'll kind of give you like a bit of a break on a double space. If you don't, ask the organizer if you do. Okay. Because just about every organizer I know does this. I did it when I was putting events together. The events that I visit and have attended as a vendor, this occurs as well. So if it's not somewhere on the vendor application that you get a discount for a double booth, definitely ask the organizer about it. But with the way that you have your booth laid out, I like the layout. I think it's visitor friendly, which is great. I think the visitors can approach from a couple different angles. You have things facing different directions. So everything isn't just facing one direction. So that's really important too. And the space that you have, like I said, you've maximized it, so obviously it's not underutilized. Okay. So very good. I think that really it just boils down to either making a tough sacrifice on, cutting some sort of display out of your setup if you do not want to expand, or by expanding. So just something to think about with your use of space. When it comes to the eye test is the 1 or 2 seconds that a visitor is walking by and what are you doing at your booth to get people to stop and check out your work. So I think your branding helps. I like your branding. The fact that your banner is fantastic and the fact that you've kind of rolled that like into the booth, it's very attractive, the marketing and the branding at the booth. Then when you start to dig a little bit deeper at the items, there's almost something for everybody. Okay. So you're hitting on a lot of different mediums. And for the most part, I think they're showcased pretty well. The stickers, these little crocheted items, they get a little bit lost in the mix. The art prints, they're not showcased in a way where the designs are all shown off. Okay, so this could be an improvement. But the greeting cards are showcased wonderfully, and I like the placement of them at the booth. Okay, so a lot of good things going on here. The gumball machine, very helpful for the eye test, okay, because this is something we talked about where, again, it's a really cool, interesting element at the booth, and this is something that people will remember and perhaps be drawn to, okay? So this can be something that pulls people in as well. So great job with the booth. I'm going to go over and kind of recap some things that you're doing well, and then some things that, possibly can be improved upon. So let's cover the good first, all right? So your price ranges, absolutely fantastic at the booth. You've got items that are as low as $2 all the way up to $300. Okay, so as far as price range goes, this is probably the best that we've seen in the booth review series. Okay, so absolutely crushing it. There's a lot of items kind of like in that sweet spot in the middle too. So particularly in this section here. So your art prints, your greeting cards, and then some of these items are kind of in that nice mid-range of like, $5 to about $50, so sitting in that, mid-range. I think that's where probably a bulk of your purchases are going to come from. Yes, you will get a lot of sales on your smaller items, but those take a lot to add up. So it's good that you have all three tiers well represented at the booth. Another good element is your logo, your banner, top notch. Definitely one of the best in the booth review series that we've seen. Maybe my favorite banner that I've seen in this series so far. Just wonderful. And, the fact that you've got it mixed down here with your colors and your overall branding well represented at the booth, on top of the tables, over here on the top of the tent, you've got like these tassels hanging down. Excellent. Really, really nicely done. Now your amount of signage is really wonderful as well. So your pricing is very clearly defined. Any item that's at the booth, it's easy to understand how much it costs. Okay, so that's excellent to see. Then as we look at the right side of the booth, the signage over here is wonderful. Your marketing signage is tremendous, has your business logo on it. You've got QR codes. You've got old school methods mixed in. You've got this event calendar. Your signage is just tremendous. Okay, so the amount of it is very, very good. The gumball game, right? So this is really cool. It's a fun, interactive element. Gets visitors to, remember you, and it's a memorable, fun experience that can probably draw people in. Your business cards located in multiple spots at the booth. Okay, so we see them here. We see them over here by the signage. And then back on this table, we've got your third placement and your fourth placement. So you've got 4 different areas with business cards, and yet it doesn't feel like they're in the way anywhere. I think they're tucked into really nice spots, because here you wouldn't be able to showcase an item anyways, because you have this spinning display. You don't want something in front of it. So this is really nice where it's serving a great purpose and it's in a great location. Here too, it's right in front of the basket that is slightly taller than the business card stand in itself. So again, really nice placement here. As we go to the right side of the booth, you've got a good location over here underneath these prominent, really eye-catching items. So it's great to have business cards underneath them. Somebody might see these and be like, oh my God, these are huge. These are amazing, and then they might snatch up a business card since they're checking these big premier items out. So good placement here. And then of course, also over here, it makes sense to have it by all of your marketing signage. So all 4 locations of where you put these make sense. So that is a big highlight of the booth. And then finally, the handles and your web address all match. Okay, so that is super important. Your web address is artsycraft-dee.com, and that is the exact handle for your Facebook and Instagram. And it looks like also your Pinterest and TikTok as well, so because you've got that on the sign right here. Okay, so it looks like you have a clean sweep. All of your marketing is branded the exact same way. That is huge for people being able to find you online. Okay, so it's not like you have a slightly different address, a slightly different handle for Facebook, a slightly different one for Instagram, yada yada. It's all the same. Okay, so that is tremendous with marketing. All right, now let's talk about the things that you can possibly make improvements on. So the biggest one for me at the booth is to consider a double booth. Okay, I think it's really warranted and justified at the booth, and I think it's going to do you far more good than harm. Okay, so definitely something to consider at the booth. The art print designs are showcased in a way where almost the entire design is blocked. Okay, so these just need a little help. Okay, and we talked about a couple of different ways to improve upon that. We also talked about having the possibility of a white top for a canopy, not only to bring a little bit more of the focus on your items, but to better disperse light inside of the booth. That's very important. And then we also talked about your signage over here, trying to make these signs more uniform so that not only does it just lean into the branding a little bit more, but it is a little bit less distracting and it's easier to find the signage. Okay, so having the signage uniform would be nice because I think it's going to keep the focus a little bit more on the items and not, like different colored borderline neon signs up here stealing a little bit of the attention. And then another thing we mentioned too was the verticality at the booth, trying to carve out some space so that you're a little bit more visible as a vendor to the shoppers, okay, because that's something that they definitely like. So this was episode 33 in the Craft Fair booth review series. We're getting up there, 33. I think you're the third Pennsylvania vendor, so that's kind of exciting too. Maybe you guys will, who knows, maybe you guys will participate in a show sometime. So be sure to check out Deidra online, okay? So follow her on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok. Check out her .com website, all of that, okay? Just be supportive to one another. And if you are interested in having your booth reviewed, click on the join button below this video. It's gonna take you to a screen that shows you what is all entailed with being a channel member, all the perks that come with it, the different tiers and different levels. But one of the things that you get is a free booth review. So getting your booth review, hopefully, comes with a lot of tips and it can help to springboard your business a little bit. But there's also a whole lot of other perks. You're able to submit questions for the channel member Q&A videos. You get access to all of my printable resource guides that I normally sell on Etsy. You will get those for free. You're going to get a shout out on my website as a supporter. You're going to get occasional member shout outs right here on YouTube in the community tab. So there's a lot to being a channel member, and thank you so much for all the members who have stuck around to continue to support the channel and make this channel possible. Again, this was episode 33 in the Craft Fair booth review series. To check out all the other booth reviews, click on this playlist above, and thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for tolerating my voice today, and please consider liking and subscribing.